Imagine you're standing in a world with no cities, no writing, no religion as we know it, just endless forests, open grasslands, and small bands of humans struggling to survive one day at a time. Someone in your group dies. What happens next? Did they simply leave the body behind? Did they bury their dead? Did they mourn the way we do today? The answer is far stranger and far more human than most people realize, because the story of death isn't just about how we dispose of bodies. It's the story of when humans first began caring about one another long after life had ended. For millions of years, our early ancestors probably didn't have funerals at all. The earliest members of the human family lived in dangerous environments filled with predators. Every day was a fight to find food, avoid becoming prey, and protect the group. If someone died, spending hours digging a grave with nothing but hands or simple stone tools would have been an enormous cost. It burned precious energy and exposed the group to danger. In many cases, the body may simply have been left where the person died. Nature would quickly take over. Scavengers, insects, weather, and time would erase nearly every trace. That sounds harsh to us today, but survival came before sentiment. And because bodies left on the surface rarely become fossils, archaeologists have almost no direct evidence of what happened during this earliest chapter of human history. For hundreds of thousands of years, death may have been treated as another unavoidable part of nature. But eventually, something changed. Around 400,000 years ago, evidence begins to suggest that humans were thinking differently about death. One of the most intriguing sites lies deep inside a cave system in what is now Spain. Known as the Pit of Bones, it contains the remains of dozens of ancient humans. Some researchers believe these bodies were intentionally placed there, making it one of the earliest known examples of deliberate disposal of the dead. Others argue natural processes may have carried the bones into the chamber instead. The debate continues, but it raises an extraordinary possibility. Maybe humans had already begun separating their dead from the living, not because they fully understood death, but because death had started to mean something beyond simple biology. Then came the Neanderthals. For decades, they were portrayed as primitive cave dwellers with little emotional depth. Modern discoveries tell a different story. Several archaeological sites show Neanderthal bodies lying in carefully dug pits. Some appear to have been positioned deliberately. A few were buried alongside stone tools, animal bones, or other objects. For years, people believed flower pollen found in one grave proved they buried loved ones with bouquets. That idea captured imaginations around the world. Later research suggested the pollen may actually have been carried into the grave by burrowing animals rather than placed there by humans. Even so, the evidence for intentional burial remains strong. Whether motivated by respect, hygiene, protection from scavengers, or beliefs we can no longer understand, Neanderthals were doing something remarkable. They weren't simply abandoning the dead. They were caring for them. When Homo sapiens entered the picture, the story became even more complex. By roughly 100,000 years ago, intentional burials appear in several parts of Africa and the Middle East. Some graves contain red ochre, a naturally occurring mineral with a striking blood-like color. No one knows exactly why it was used. Perhaps it symbolized life, perhaps rebirth, perhaps it simply held cultural meaning that has been lost forever. Some individuals were buried with shells, beads, or carefully crafted ornaments. Children were sometimes buried with just as much care as adults. That alone tells us something profound. These weren't practical decisions, they reflected emotion, identity, and memory. Somebody loved these people enough to spend valuable time preparing them for death. As humans spread across the planet, burial customs exploded into astonishing diversity. Different environments created different solutions. In icy regions where frozen ground made digging nearly impossible, some groups placed bodies on elevated platforms where birds and weather slowly returned them to nature. In dense forests, graves were often shallow because roots and hard soil limited how deep people could dig. In deserts, the dry climate naturally preserved some bodies for thousands of years. Along many coastlines, shell mounds became burial grounds, slowly growing over generations. Some societies practiced cremation, others built stone tombs. Others returned bodies to caves used by the same families for centuries. There was no universal method, only one shared idea: the dead deserved attention. Then agriculture changed everything. Around 12,000 years ago, people stopped constantly moving and began settling in permanent villages. For the first time, Communities lived beside the graves of previous generations. Ancestors were no longer distant memories. They became part of the landscape itself. Some early farming communities buried family members beneath house floors. Imagine eating dinner every day above the resting place of your grandparents. To modern minds, that sounds unsettling. To them, it likely meant the opposite. The dead remained close to the living. They continued to belong to the household. As settlements grew into cities, burial traditions became increasingly elaborate. Powerful rulers built massive tombs designed to survive for eternity. Ordinary people were buried according to local customs, family traditions, and religious beliefs. Death had become deeply connected with identity, status, and culture. Ancient Egypt transformed burial into one of history's most recognizable traditions. The Egyptians believed preserving the body was essential for life after death. Through mummification, they carefully removed internal organs, dried the body, wrapped it in linen, and placed it inside decorated coffins. Food, jewelry, tools, and written spells often accompanied the deceased. Gigantic pyramids and richly decorated tombs reflected a civilization convinced that death was not the end, but another beginning. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the world, other civilizations developed completely different beliefs. The ancient Greeks honored the dead with ceremonies and offerings. The Romans held funeral processions through city streets. In parts of Asia, ancestor worship became central to family life. Across the Americas, countless indigenous cultures developed burial customs uniquely adapted to their landscapes and spiritual traditions. Different beliefs, different rituals, the same universal reality. Everyone had to answer the same question. What do we do when someone we love is gone? Today, burial practices vary more than ever. Many families choose traditional cemeteries. Others prefer cremation. Some select natural burials that allow the body to decompose without embalming chemicals. Newer methods even explore turning human remains into reefs that support marine life or compost that nourishes forests. Technology changes, culture changes, religion changes, but one thing has remained surprisingly constant across tens of thousands of years. We rarely treat death as just the disappearance of a body. We pause, we gather, we remember. Whether it was an early human quietly covering a loved one with earth using bare hands, a Neanderthal placing someone carefully into a shallow grave, an Egyptian preparing a pharaoh for eternity, or a family standing silently beside a modern coffin, the action is remarkably similar. It says that this person mattered, that their absence leaves a space that cannot simply be ignored. And perhaps that's the most extraordinary part of the entire story. The first funeral wasn't really about death. It was about love surviving long enough to change human behavior, long before history books, long before civilizations, long before anyone wrote a single word. Our ancestors had already discovered something that still connects every culture on Earth. The way we treat our dead says just as much about the living.